Hello, everyone. My name is Pete Marin. I work with Airbrush Events. We manage a team of Airbrush professionals who paint party favors live at events. So I'm making this video because recently I've been getting a lot of questions about pricing. More specifically, how we go about pricing our t-shirts and other items. And so I want to address this question to all the Airbrush artists out there. And by the way, if you're an experienced airbrush artist and you have some ideas or comments about this, please leave us your comments. We're interested in hearing what you have to say. So I want to define first the difference between what I do and what a lot of other airbrush professionals do. Like I said, we paint party favors for live events, and thus the transaction is a little different than most, I guess, retail situations. Contrast that with someone who has something like an airbrush store or maybe a kiosk in a mall or something like that where they're selling individual items, let's say a t-shirt or a hat or whatever it is, even a helmet or a car. If you want to paint a car for someone, I would consider that something like retail. I'll use retail as a descriptor. It could be other things. But what we do is more of contract-based transactions. In other words, since we work at events, I like using the analogy of it's no different than if our client were to hire us like a DJ. DJs work on a per hour basis. Same thing goes for, let's say, catering. We're just like caterers, right? We create a contract ahead of time that stipulates the time, the place, what kind of services we're going to offer for our client, and that agreement is made up front. Sometimes some people will collect deposits, or maybe they have it paid in full before the event even occurs. In whatever case, maybe that's what I would consider like a contract event. And that's primarily what we do. Okay, we don't deal with any type of retail. Some companies do both. I know a few that do both contract events and retail. They have an airbrush store where they sell. So the pricing for each obviously is going to be a lot different. And rather than talk about what I charge for my customers, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my philosophy, about how I structure pricing. So going back in history, when I first started doing events, I really didn't know much about how to go about pricing. I had a lot of the same questions that I'm getting asked now. And one of the solutions to that would be to just call maybe another company who does what we do and pretend you're a customer and ask them how much an event would cost. I don't recommend that. I always thought that felt a little bit like cheating or a little deceptive, right? So I never did that. And most airbrush companies that do events don't advertise their prices on websites, and there's a good reason for that. I've learned to discover that it's almost impossible to tell you what the rates are without having more details about what the customer wants. Things like the duration of the event, how many people are going to be there, what type of party favors, where the event will be held. If it's far from your base of operations, obviously there's going to be some travel fees. And there might be some other things that affect the price. So again, my philosophy in the beginning was, well, I'm just going to make it up as I go. And I started with a price that I thought would allow me to keep the lights on, pay the bills, right, after all of my expenses. What does that mean? Well, my expenses would include, obviously, the monthly reoccurring expenses. Maybe there's a bookkeeping fee, or you got to pay for, I don't know, equipment. If you're renting a storage unit, like I did, to put your stuff in, all that stuff. But more specifically, like maybe the party favors. Let's just get right down to that. I realized that I needed to come up with an estimate of how many party favors I could paint in an hour. Okay. And so if we're talking about t-shirts, at least for me, I was able to, in the designs that I had created for events, which was just simple name designs, I was capable of painting about a maximum of 25 shirts per hour. I say maximum, like that comfortably working speed, 25. So I know what a shirt costs. I know how much I can paint in an hour, the maximum. So therefore, I can break down how much an event would cost me per hour in materials, assuming we're using t-shirts, right? So it's the cost of the t-shirt times 25 t-shirts in 1 hour. That's my cost, my operation costs at an event, or cost of sales, COS, as they would call it in bookkeeping jargon. And then we'd have to do that calculation again for hats. I discovered that painting hats is a lot faster than t-shirts. And the cost of a hat is different. So that calculation would be different as well. It'd be the cost of the hat, an individual hat, plus shipping, right? Because you're going to have to pay for shipping on these items, times how many you can paint in an hour, maximum, would give you the cost per hour for an event with hats. What other costs might you include there? Well, if you're using CO2 instead of an air compressor, then refilling your tanks is going to be an expense. So how many events can you do with a single CO2 tank? Then there's paint. Now paint's a little harder, right? Because a 2-ounce bottle of paint goes a long way. But after doing so many events, I actually did track how many events I could do on a bottle of paint. Oh, but it gets more complicated than that. We use a lot more black than we do yellow, for example, right? So not every color is treated equally when it comes to how much you use at an event. Well, eventually I kept some records, and eventually I kind of figured it out. I realized that I could probably do, I think I remember now, it's about 30 hours worth of work with a bottle of yellow, or with a bottle of green or orange. Those are colors that I didn't use very much. Contrast that with only 8 hours with a bottle of black. And I'm saying bottle, I mean a 2-ounce bottle. Now, those figures are going to be different for you because maybe your designs lean more heavily towards using green or orange compared to mine. So you'll be using more of those colors. But I think you know where I'm going with this. Come up with even some rough estimates, because when it comes to paint, it's a very small expense anyway. It's really not going to matter that much to your bottom line. But try to, I guess, get a big picture about all the expenses that go into an event. And you may have to do some events and make calculations. Eventually, you're going to be very secure about knowing how much an event will cost you. And that's not including travel, by the way. It's also not including paying someone else to do an event, right? Hiring other artists. So now you have the base, and you can go from there. So if an event costs you, I'm going to throw some really wild numbers out there so you don't get, I don't want to clue in anyone as to how much I'm charging. I don't think that's important here. And the reason why I say that is because what I charge for an event reflects the products and services that I offer my customers, and promises that I offer my customers, which could be different than yours, and obviously be a lot different than yours based on geographical location. I think that it's probably common knowledge that things in New York City are a lot more expensive than, say, somewhere in the Midwest, right? So you can take that into account when you're coming up with your pricing. Anyway, back to what I was saying. We have a baseline of how much an event costs, and then we just, again, this is going to be up to you. How much do I want to make per an event, right? I found that the first time I ever did an event, it was a whole lot of work because I didn't have a system in place. And when I say system, I mean, maybe it's like a checklist, right? All the things I need to bring to an event. I didn't have the equipment that might have been ideal for events, right? I had large easels and I had a big compressor and, maybe overkill, but it was the equipment I had at the time. And maybe I brought too many colors or whatever it was. Over time, I learned to downsize, simplify, make my own equipment that was suitable for events, that was lighter and stronger and smaller. So now the work that goes into an event compared to when I first started is much less. And therefore, my perceived profit is higher. Even if I hadn't changed my rates, because it's less work and I'm earning the same amount of money, I feel like, I'm actually making more money. But I had to decide, what's a comfortable profit margin for me? What makes it worthwhile in my mind to go out and do this? And then I also had this philosophy, and this could be different than you, that it was more important for me to fill up my calendar than it was to just charge a whole lot of money for a single event, because I wanted the business to grow. And it's really hard to build a business if your prices are higher than everyone else and you're still new to the game, right? So I knew that by just filling up my calendar, not only would I, of course, get more business and more revenue, but I would gain the experience that I desperately needed to become great at what I wanted to do, which was events. So my philosophy was, you know what? I'm just going to fill up my calendar, and when I can't do anymore, I'm going to do one of two things. I'm going to hire people, or I'm going to raise my rates. And sometimes those things happened at the same time. But I went years without raising my rates. And I've raised my rates in the past 2 years more than I have my whole career. And that's because of we've all been hit with inflation. I'm sure you know, cost of t-shirts have gone up, cost of flights and gas and everything else, even labor, right? So I had to raise my rates. But also because we've gotten a lot busier. We have a lot of repeat business from agencies who like to feed us work. Our website is gaining some traction with Google, so we get our website pops up on the search a lot easier than it used to, and so on. So that being said, I think you get at where I'm going with this. It's going to be a personal decision, but you got to figure out how much is an event going to cost you before you can figure out how much profit you want to put on top of that. All right, so I've talked about events. Let's talk a little bit about retail. Now, as I said, retail compared to doing contracts, events, retail is more like, let me back up a little bit. When we go to an event, it's one client, the host of the event, who's paying us, right? It could be a company, it could be an event planner, or it could be the bar mitzvah mom, whatever. It's one contract, one paycheck. If you're doing retail, you might be set up at, let's say, a festival or maybe in a flea market or at a mall or a store, whatever it is. You're selling individual shirts to individual customers. So you have a cash register, right? And you're ringing up sales. That's basically the difference, right? We don't have a cash register. Everything's done via invoice, sent to an email, and they pay online with a credit card, every transaction, just for simplicity. So with retail, because you're charging per shirt, we'll say shirts as an example, doesn't have to be t-shirts that you're selling. It works similarly, but really it's not as crucial about how much a shirt costs, because really, let's face it, a shirt is right around what, I should know this by heart, but I don't. I think it's just over $2 per shirt. Obviously, you're not going to double the cost of an Airbrush shirt. You'd have to do it a lot more than that, right? I think it's when you're talking retail, it's more important to get in the mind of the customer. So the perceived value, and I like using perceived value of a t-shirt, for most people is right around, I don't know, it could be $20 to $35 maybe. And I think the problem comes, I think a lot of people, airbrush artists, know that as much as they might like painting portraits, because they look great and they're certainly impressive to a lot of average people on the street when they see an airbrush portrait, kind of like, wow, that's really good. There's a glass ceiling as far as how much we can charge for it, not because it's a portrait, because it's on a t-shirt. How much would you pay for a t-shirt, even if it was an awesome looking t-shirt? So, there's going to be limits to what you can charge for a t-shirt. Now, most airbrush shops out there, they have what I would consider standard designs. Now, when you're designing your store, or maybe it's a festival setup, whatever it is, you want to display your artwork, you want to be thinking in terms of, what can I paint in, I would say, 10 to 20 minutes. You don't want to spend more than 20 minutes on a t-shirt. Now, as a new airbrush artist, it might take you longer than 20 minutes to paint almost anything. Um, and that will come with the experience. You will get faster. But I would try to keep your shirts probably, in the 20 to $30 range max in the beginning. And if they take you a little longer, well, that's okay because maybe you're not that busy anyway. It's a new business. You can spend a little more time. Take advantage of the fact that you aren't busy and focus on building your art skills. Pay attention to composition, to color, to technique, to cleanliness, minimizing overspray. Study other artists' work. Copy it. I don't mean copy the designs, but copy their style maybe. Notice what they're doing and what they're not doing. All right. Again, use that slow period in your business to really focus on your art. Practice on getting faster without sacrificing quality. I've always said that because I used to own an airbrush shop, a couple of them, airbrush store. I really I would call it clean cheese, right? Cheese like cheesy. It's a standard design. It's kind of like the value meal at McDonald's. It's really quick. It's easy. You just point to it. It's got the nice picture. I want that one. It's not complicated. It's simple, as a matter of fact. I think that if you can focus on color and composition, and of course something that's hot, right? What's hot in today's culture, let's say. Keep it fast and clean, and you can make a lot of money off of those. It's the burger and fries that you do sell over and over again that makes you money. It's not the hot portrait that took you 2 hours or 3 hours to paint. Okay. I would much rather paint 5 $20 shirts than one $100 shirt. I could probably do them a lot faster too. Okay. Especially if I'm the one that's designing the designs to be quick and easy to paint. It doesn't mean they look bad. They're just clean, efficient, well-designed samples. Okay. Samples, designs, I use that word interchangeably. So, all right, let's see where we are. We know the costs, which are negligible when it comes to retail. Cost of a t-shirt, the cost of paint is negligible compared to what you're actually going to be selling the shirt for. So really what you're selling is the design, your expertise, and maybe a little bit of the show. Because, if you're at a festival, people are going to watch you. Make sure they can see your easel, all right? I even would prefer to have my back turned to the people who are watching just so they could watch me paint. Because believe me, that is at least half of the experience of buying an Airbrush t-shirt. Don't gyp them on that. Take advantage of it. So, I think the same rule goes with retail, that you want to just value the time you have when you're not busy and your new business on getting better and doing more, providing more value for your customers. Maybe go the extra mile and add some things they didn't even ask for. Well, I got to be careful when I say that. A little more extra somehow, right? Under promise, over deliver. I like that. And that'll build your skill. And you'll develop a reputation of someone who under promises and over delivers on the product. And people will come to you and give you more experience. And again, same rules apply. When you start to get so busy that you can't keep up, you can do one of two things. You can hire more people, or you can raise your rates. Now, technically, you could do three things. Whenever I try to improve my business, because I feel like I'm just have so much coming at me and I can't handle anymore, there's really three things you do. Improve your systems. Okay, systems can be just the way you do things, right? Like moving your t-shirt racker a little closer to your easel so you're not walking back and forth. Keeping all your supplies at the ready, like you need a pencil, you need some airbrush cleaner, you need some paper towels, whatever it is. You have a checklist of things to buy every Monday morning, whatever it is, to make sure you're well stocked and you're not wasting trips back and forth to the hardware store or whatever. I think you know what I'm saying. Systems. They don't cost you anything. They just require a little bit of ingenuity. Next is technology. You can harness technology to take a lot of the workload. Technology, a good example of that would be, well, obviously a website, right? That's probably the first thing you should get. But maybe a contact management system. If you're in a business of events like myself, a CRM or contact management system is essential, right? That's the place where you put all the addresses of your customers and maybe some activity sets or pipelines. These are the things that you need to do in order to make sure that the event is well prepared, and they pop up reminders for you so you know, like, okay, on Saturday we're going to have a list of things to do, and the following week we're going to have three more things to do. That's what a CRM can do for you. That would be an example of technology, right? Or maybe you can upgrade your equipment, whatever makes your job easier. Like I love spending money on my business if I know it's going to make my job easier, right? And it does, believe it or not. It's possible to have a business grow double even and your job get easier, which is counterintuitive. But you're leveraging systems, you're leveraging technology. That's the second piece. The last piece, obviously, is people. Hire more people. Now, people are expensive, so that's usually the last thing I would do, right? I always try to figure out ways to do my systems first. When that's exhausted, I move to technology, because sometimes that can cost, but it's going to be certainly a lot less than paying payroll. And then lastly, you get people. And then after you get people, you got to do it all over again. You need to go back to systems. Now, you're managing a person. What kind of systems do you have in place that they can follow so they can do the same things you do in the way that you like to do it? What kind of technology are they going to use? Are they going to have access to the same technology? They're going to have their own software maybe, or own computer, or whatever it is. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone. I think you know where I'm going with that. The retail isn't that much different than doing contracted events in the way you're thinking about it. The philosophy, like, get busy first, work on your skills, work on your systems, then raise your rates. It's okay to be a little cheaper in the beginning, to make a little less money, because really what you need is experience. So I hope that answers. It was a really long-winded, it's a 22-minute video. But anyway, I appreciate you watching all the way through. I hope this was valuable to you. And again, if you're an experienced airbrush artist, I'd really love to hear how you run your business and how you come up with pricing. Definitely don't talk about actual numbers. It's not what I'm here to do. I'm just talking about philosophy and pricing. Thanks for following.